Welcome to another Griff's Conversation with people from my past, with people from baseball's past. And today we interview Rodger Brulotte. I had several requests from regular listeners, from subscribers to griffsthepitch.com asking for Rodger. And I thought, why not? Here we go, you know? And coincidentally, on Thursday night, Rodger received a prestigious award at the Gala Sport Quebec. It was the L'Hommage Jacques Beauchamp. And we all remember Jacques Beauchamp from the days. I think, didn't Jacques start a Philly newspaper as well?
Yeah, well, Jacques Beauchamp was the sports editor that changed the world of sports in Quebec, how to cover it, Griff. He came in there, he started going getting quotes in the dressing rooms, what exists today. Harder to get over today. He used to do stories on the players, encourage a lot of amateur sports, and helped you and I through our careers with the Expos. And Mr. Beauchamp, that homage is for people who are they're known as builders, and I was recognized as a builder for baseball and also the other sports because of my job. I cover other sports, such as you name it, I cover it. You know, when I go and see a curling game, I'm learning what's happening. Everyone's shouting, but I shout with them. I go and see another sport, and I learn about them, and it was very touching. Especially, it's an amateur sports, and it's all young future Olympians that are honored there, which is fun.
Yeah, I can't imagine you as a curler, Raj.
I tried once, Rich. I tried once. Take my
I,
word.
I was
I
on my I was on my high school curling team as a lead. I think we went to one Bonspiel, and
oh boy,
I was the lead and put every rock through the house. I couldn't stop one in the and so
that I'm not surprised with.
they
Don't kid
dropped
me.
me
I'm
like a
not.
rock at that
You're
point.
the only guy who I know who puts 1 foot from the green from the hole and ends up 5 feet behind it.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
the only one I know who
I've
does that.
changed. I've settled down. I've mellowed in that regard.
But just to
Um,
come back to that homage, Michael Kingsbury was there, one of our
I
greatest
saw
Canadian
that. Yeah, I
athletes.
saw
And
that.
Michael Kingsbury, I gave him his first medal in his life. He was a
Wow.
baseball player. He was 12 years old. He was playing in Saint Eustache, a suburb of Montreal, and he was the star of the game. And I gave him a medal. He still has it at home.
And it's for him, it's been all downhill since there.
And jumping from left to right.
So, with my listeners, with the listeners to Griff's The Pitch and to our conversations, you're most famous for your iconic home run calls with Jacques Doucette and with various partners that you've had. And the one that really broke through, I thought, was the Vlad Guerrero. I think Jacques had the home run call, and Vlad,
Yeah,
as a rookie, invited to join at Stade Olympique,
that's
hit the
right.
walk-off home run. And if anybody hasn't heard that, they should go on to YouTube. I did that last night, and I couldn't help but smile over the call and the. I mean, it reminded me of the guy in soccer who got famous for the
His
goal
goal.
call. But it wasn't just that call. It was the iconic elle partie, which a lot of people also listen to all around North America. I mean, you see that you go travel, and if there's a big home run that you were working,
And
they'll
they
play.
go, Bonsoir,
Yeah,
elle est partie.
elle partie.
You know,
Um,
when I did that home run, the call was spontaneous. And then when I thought of it after, it was a mixture of the Blue Jays history and the Expos history with the same name.
yeah.
The same name. I thought of that maybe a couple of days. It takes me a while to think, Rich, you know how I am. And a couple of days later, I said, you know what? That was a mixture of both histories, the father and the son and the two teams.
Well, you know what's struck me in hindsight? I found this out afterwards, but the invitation for Bo and Vlad to come and play in that series was came late. They were coming up from, I think they were in New Hampshire at the time. And so they were coming up to join the team. They were from spring training, and Vlad didn't have a uniform. But Dwight Smith had just been sent to the Orioles and he wore number 27.
Is
And
that right?
so they handed Vlad this only available uniform, which was his dad's number.
Wow.
The whole thing comes together in that regard, and you go, wow, that was meant
That's
to be, you know?
I did the Jose Batista famous bat flip. And when he saw me the next year, he said, "Hey, I listened to your home run calls. It's spectacular. Just a little bit, just a little bit." And I'm
Yeah.
privileged because the Blue Jays occasionally use one of my home run calls on their websites, which is a privilege. That's
But
besides across the U.S. and the Hall of Fame.
well, you know, that explains why Major League Baseball has recognized the Blue Jays website as for awards as the best in baseball, and it's probably due to your home run calls.
Well, it's part of it. That's for, and I'm sure they're saying, "Who the heck is this guy at the
Yeah.
other end?"
Anyway, when I walked into the office in March 73, we were both younger then.
A few years.
I came in for an interview with Larry Chiasson, who was the director of PR, former Canadian press reporter, and it was a fledgling team, 3 years old. And his staff included Francois Ferland, Monique Giroux, Paul Shubin, and you.
That's right.
Now, talk about the early years, because I learned a lot from not just you, but everyone, about dealing with people and treating people with respect and the game with respect. But talk about those early years at Jerry Park when there was a minimum of staff and a maximum of joy.
It was a family reunion every day. Griff, you came in the first day, and without any doubt, you were accepted as member of the family, as if you've been there since day one. I was lucky I'm there since May 69 that I started with the Expos and went through different positions we'll talk about later on. But when we worked at the Expos at the beginning, we were a big family. And we were a family that we wanted one thing. The players were the most important thing to do, and the players accepted our philosophy, and we went everywhere. Remember when we used to go in parks, go and see Little League games? Who was with us? Gary Carter, Steve Rogers, Kenny Singleton. They just used to come. We used to go into all the parks and show up with no invitation. And there was Gary Carter signing autographs for a bunch of kids. And it was that throughout. We were a family organization.
I think that, I know we all have different views of John McHale, but John McHale told me early on, I think it was just one of the early years at Stade Olympique, at Olympic Stadium. He said, all you got to do to be successful in this game is love the sport and respect everyone in it.
Mr. McHale, when I was hired in 69, and then when I went into the player development and scouting, he came up to me and he said, Rodger, remember one thing. There's only one thing important in the organization: the players on the field. They're the ones that people want to see. And we're there to build around them that they become good citizens and good athletes known to the population. And when he taught me that, one thing Mr. McHale did, he brought class to the organization at all levels. He was criticized because sometimes he got involved, but it was also for the best of the team. And when you look where he brought the Expos from 69 till the end, he and Jim Fanning were the foundations of that organization.
Yeah, I think that I've made the point over the years, and I mirror what you're saying, is that a team that was formed in 1968 and began playing in 1969, for them to have the same owner, Charles Bronfman, the same president, John McHale, the same general manager, Jim Fanning, the same manager, Gene Mock, for the first 5 years, you look at expansion teams throughout the U.S., and that never happens. You don't have that consistency. And to bring baseball back to a city and a province and a country that hadn't had it since 1960, since the Royals left, it was important to have that consistency, as you just pointed out.
And the thing, Rich, when you joined the team, remember now, 1973, first time they're on the field is 1969. 1973, the Expos are eliminated from being in the playoffs the last weekend by the Mets. Remember that. We had just traded Rusty Staub. Mike Marshall came in relief in Chicago. We blew a lead. Gene Mock was managing. But in 73, we were there battling for a playoff spot. And you know what's too bad? You and I don't have one of the copies of the World Series tickets that were printed. It'd be worth a fortune today.
That was my first. They sent me, I think Jim Fanning sent me on that road trip to.
Is that right?
In late September. So I was sitting in the press box. Ron Hunt was injured. He was sitting next to me. We had just seen Willie Mays Day, which I've never seen anything like it, with the number of gifts that he received for his retirement. And he did play the World Series, but that was his day, and we were there for it. And my eyes as a kid were just bugged open that baseball could be like this. And then in the 8th inning, Tim Foley hit a ball that looked like it was going into the bullpen, and the wind came up. The gods of baseball did not want the Expos.
They did not want us to be there. No,
we
were supposed to win that game.
Came up and knocked the ball down, and it was caught. And Hunt elbowed me, and we couldn't believe that that ball didn't go out. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But you
that's
think
how
of
close it came.
1973, and we think of the players, the Expos, go through all the expansion teams. Okay. How many of them had Hall of Famers playing with them so early? Gary Carter, early in his career, it was signed Hall of Fame. Then you look at the other players that went through Raines, Dawson, Walker, the number of young players that came out of there, and all good people who were proud to be Expo players.
Yeah, the I remember the day that I sort of gained the respect of Larry Chasson and the department when it was, and this is an odd story for me to be telling,
But
but
I'll confirm it. That's what's worse.
it was Farm Day in 1975, maybe 76. Farm
With
Day.
Woody Fryman. Woody Fryman and the cows.
The two highlights were Woody Fryman milking the cow, and he would take on all comers and he would win every year. And Pepe Frias chasing the greased pig.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so we're promoting Farm Day, we're promoting those two events, and the pig was coming down from Saint Eustache in a cube van, and it was like 40 degrees Celsius. And pigs don't have sweat glands.
No, they
So the
don't.
guy opens the back of the van and the pig is dead.
That's exactly right.
The pig is dead. So we're going, oh my God, how are we going to explain this to, I don't know whether PETA existed back then, but there's ethical
It did.
treatment of animals.
Yeah.
And so I said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. So in the game notes, I put that Pepe Frias will not be chasing the pig because he pulled a hamstring. And people were so amused by a hamstring and the pig.
Everything, and you had that all
They didn't
planned.
ask any more questions.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
So
Oh, no.
I don't think they buried the pig. I think they just made bacon out of him or whatever.
Probably. But Rick, when you look at where we were back then, it was easier to work with teams because they did not feel each time they were criticized that it was personal.
Yeah.
Today, the world of sports has changed. When you criticize an event, the person takes it personally, and they shouldn't take it personally. It's an event. That's all it is.
We moved to Olympic Stadium in '77. There was
But Jerry, hold on, Richard. Remember the guy with his plastic duck?
yeah.
He used to come. He used to come at the games, and he had a plastic duck, and he bought a seat for it, and it would be there. It'd be there. And then you had the dancer, Claude Desjardins, going down the aisles dancing. Fernand Lapierre at the organ playing songs. The Expos, because of Fernand, is the first team in the history of sports that when a player came up to bat, Fernand played his song. That's where it started. And today it's done automatically, but he's the one who started. We were way ahead. I remember Buzz Bevesi was the GM for the Padres back then. He said, you know what? You have more, you threw out more people out of a game than I have at attendance at a game.
That aspect that you spoke about earlier with the players treating them differently, we had to because it was Canada.
That's right.
The winter caravan and bringing Fernand Lapierre and going to all the corners of the province, and what brought this to mind was you talking about going to random baseball games through the city with players. But when I see players that we worked with to this day, they talk about Montreal. They love the experience that they had there, whether it was 1 year, 5 years, and they mention the winter tours, the winter caravans.
Yeah.
I mean, you were a big part of that. What did that bring to both sides, to the player side and to the people that they were visiting?
And once again, a big family. A big family. Griff, when we went through it, we used to go in town. You'd think of the smallest town 1,000 miles away from Toronto, and we were there in a blizzard, in the cold, and we're traveling in a little van or just going down there. And when we got there, the players were treated as if they were World Series heroes. Pedro Martinez, the first time he was treated as a hero was on the caravan. He pitched for the Expos, but when we ended up in Sept-Îles, people said, Pedro Martinez, and he said, oh, what's this? And that's what it's all about. No matter where we went, the fans were always loved our players, and our players were always respectful to the fans because in our PR department, we tried to make it's a family. It's a family. Let's get close together.
There was one event, and I'm not sure whether you were there, but it was a couple of couple of winters in a row going to Burlington, Vermont, Plattsburgh.
With Mr. Adams, Tony Adams.
Yeah, and some very deep voiced host, a local radio guy was there, and it was Tom Cheek. Do you
That's
remember
right. That's where
Tom
Tom
Cheek just
started.
being the host and then coming up and subbing for Dave Van Horn on days that Dave did TV,
Yeah.
and then coming to Toronto and being a legend, a Hall of Famer. But it started on the Caravan.
I still remember of the Caravan because he used to come down to our games regularly. But he used to meet Mr. McHale and they talk. And that voice was so unbelievable. And Mr. McHale said, why don't you start doing the baseball games for us when Dave was doing television? So there was Tom Cheek. And look at the career. Look at the career. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And like we all have role models. And I know that for Dave, it was Vin Scully. And for Tom, it was Dave, which meant Vince Scully. And there's that grasp of baseball and just it gets your attention and makes you believe that this is the greatest event going on at this moment.
When you do a baseball game, the history of the game is so important because you have young fans, you have fans in the 40s, and you have your elderly fans. There's a history there. Let the young ones discover it and let the elderly enjoy it. That's the game of baseball as a broadcaster because you have so much time to fill in. It's nice to give stats, but when you can bring in stories about, and I do that regularly, stories on players of the past, of the present, and every game I have a story on one of our great baseball athletes.
So now I can move to.
Can I tell you my story with? I'm going to tell you a story with Ohtani. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
We're at the All-Star game.
Okay?
Right. You know how I am. Okay, just to give an idea to people, I'm doing the All-Star game for TVA Sports, and there's Ohtani. And I stopped him. I said, Mr. Ohtani. And I said to him in English, I know you understand English. And he proved it in the World Series.
Mm-hmm.
I know you understand English, but I have a story for you. I have a picture at home with Sadaharu O. Now, Sadaharu O is a living legend throughout, even today. The greatest hitter they ever had in Japan and the greatest baseball player they had. And when I said that, he stopped. I said, I have a picture, and he was in Daytona Beach. Remember? You were there when the Sadaharu came to play against the Expos at Daytona Beach. And I had the pleasure to describe one of his hits. And when I told him that, he smiled, and he gave me the traditional Japanese thank you. That's what baseball is all about.
Yeah.
Here was the hero of today, and I was talking of the hero of always. That's what baseball is about.
That's part of the love the game and respect everyone in it. That's what it is. But now we go to Olympic Stadium, and there was the parade to the stadium. There was a bad team in '76 that drew 600,000 total people for the year.
And our last game was rained out.
Yeah, that's right. So there's the parade after spring training, new stadium. But now it's I move ahead to 1978. I'm in the office, and I get a call, and it's a woman named Bonnie Erickson. And she wants to know if we would like a mascot like the Philly Fanatic, who had just been born the year before. And she did the Muppets, and she gave me the whole song and dance about what it was. So I said, I don't know. I knew Suki was there, and Suki was terrible. Suki was like a Star Wars mascot
who scared the kids. The kids used to cry when they saw him.
I had just seen that the day before that Suki was scaring these kids. They were cowering. So I gave the message to you and Roger Landry.
Rodger Landry, yeah.
And so the next thing I know, there's a deal going on for a new mascot, and I understand exactly where it's coming from because I had taken that call and passed it on. But you and Roger Landry, we're sitting around, and I remember Roger goes, "We need a name. We need a name. I want people to see him and go, Youppi." And so you go, well, why not Youppi?
Yeah.
And that's it, you know? And look at him now. He's still got a job and we don't. So
well, we take pictures with him. The creation of Youppi was a triangle without any doubt. Rick, you believed in it. If you wouldn't have believed in their concept, you wouldn't have brought it up to Roger Landry, because people don't know Roger Landry. He was very enthusiastic and really, really wanted to do things. And you saw in that there was a potential to do. So he calls me in his office. He says, what do you think of us having a mascot? I said, it's a great idea. He says, what do you think it should be? I said, I have no idea what it should be as a mascot because I said, you're the one who created.
Not Suki though, not
Yes, but he's the
Suki.
one who created Suki. I said, after your success with Suki, I don't want to bring another one in. So we went down to Philadelphia and we met Harrison Erickson, the husband and the wife that today have different paths before the tragic death of the husband. But we sat down with them and we told them what we wanted. It lasted for about 3 months. Every other day, we talk. And that's how we came up to Youppi. And we talked to Disney. I went down to Disney and talked to the people in Disney. I said, what's a success with your mascots? They said, number one, they're friendly. And number two, they don't talk. So you're telling me not to talk? They said, no, because your Youppi will change throughout the years. And if he talks today, it will not be the same person in 20 years. So that was one thing. And the other thing, we wanted something that was really, really fun. Why is Youppi orange? Our number one hero, Rusty Staub, Le Grand Orange. That's why the uniform is orange, because of Youppi. And we wanted something that was huge that you could see everywhere in the park. And that's how he came in. And we had something that would be enthusiastic for the fans, and for the kids. Baseball people did not like our mascot. Like most of the baseball people still don't like mascots.
Well, I mean, that's why they have their area and we had our area, because
and I like the way you said that. I tell you what, some days Mr. McKay would come in and say, Rodger, what's Youppi doing there? So I have no idea, but I'll talk to him, Mr. McKay.
So even though it was a much larger stadium and it wasn't built for baseball, and there were all sorts of problems like parking your car, they were built for Citroën, not for,
it hasn't changed.
Whatever. But it was still a small staff and still had the feel of sort of minor league baseball moving to the next level. I remember sitting in front of the desk because Larry Chasson passed away in 1977. Yeah. So I was sitting in front of Rodger's office across from Jeanette Bocage, and the great Antonio shows up.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Of course, I get to interview him because that's what I did.
Anybody people don't know who Antonio is.
Well,
he weighed about 350 pounds and used to pull buses with his hair. He used to tie the hair around the bus, and he used to pull the bus.
This great big hairy smelly guy with tank top sitting across from me, and his proposal is he wants to wrestle a bear between games of a doubleheader on the field. He wants to wrestle a bear. And I'm thinking, no. I don't know. And he's got his van parked out. He's got his pickup parked outside with the trailer. I didn't know whether the bear was in it or not.
Especially.
But he goes through the whole spiel about wrestling the bear. And I go, I got one problem, Antonio. What if the bear wins? And he looks at me. He looks at me and goes, the bear never wins. But we turned him down. You have been in similar situations. What are some of the ones that you had to turn down? Some of the requests for participation, for joining us? And then I'll get into the one that was really a success.
Okay. I did one day a famous, remember that? We had the Lions clubs were in town, and it was a great event, and they had all marching bands. And I brought the marching bands on the field. One major mistake. They were all playing at the same time, but not one the same song. And then it was unbelievable. And then they played the national anthems, and it was fun, but wasn't exactly a great coordination. And I still remember Roger Laundrie saying to me, that one's not too good. But the worst one I did was Christmas in July.
I was just going to ask. Yeah, that's what we had. Who was our doorman at the press box? Monsieur
Barrett.
Yeah, Monsieur Barrett hammered a guy with a bell who wanted to see. He was dressed in a Santa Claus outfit, and he wanted to see you.
Yeah, I know you wanted to see me.
And so Monsieur Barrett wouldn't let him in. Finally grabbed his bell and hit the guy in the head, and there were kids walking by.
Santa Claus hitting someone with a bell.
Santa Claus being hit
You know, we had that parade that day, okay, for Santa Claus. And the Santa Claus showed up, and it wasn't the guy with the bell, it was another one. But he's a bit intoxicated. His problems with, I would say, very intoxicated. So remember, Jean Arboul, may his soul rest in peace, was responsible for all the people, the ushers, the usherettes, and at the forum also for the Canadians. So I dressed him up as Santa Claus. And then I put him up in Calèche with a horse pulling it. And I had the bright idea of saying, throw baseballs to the fans, they'll be happy.
I remember that.
The fans caught the ball, and when they caught the ball, what do you think they did? They tried to hit the Santa Claus with the ball. So we had a duel as he's going around the field. He's throwing at the fans, and the fans are throwing back at him. And after that, I get upstairs, and Rodger DeLandre doesn't even turn around. He just says, Rodger, I think that's the last Christmas parade. So we've had some nice ones also.
But here's the one I wanted to talk about. You redeemed yourself 100 times over by having the first professional appearance for Celine Dion.
Yeah. Well, see, Renée Angela and I, her manager, were very close friends. And she's singing at the Michel Jasmin show, and I'm going there with Dick Williams, who's going to be interviewed with the host. And it's one of the biggest talk shows there was in Canada. Very popular. I sang My Way there, the only song I know. And then she comes on after.
Yes, it
and
was.
She sang. Okay. So Renée comes up to me and he said, how do you find her? I said, Renée, I know nothing about music. He says she's going to be #1 in the world. Oh, she's that good? Well, next week she's going to sing at the Olympic Stadium our national anthems. She did it, and for 4 years in a row, she was our guest singer for opening day. One day, she even wore the Expos uniform. Here she is, Celine Dion. She was getting on top of the world now. She had been on the Jay Leno show after that, and here she was with an Expos uniform. And when I went to see one of her shows, she showed videos of things, and there she was wearing the Expos video. Well,
That's
the uniform in the video. That to me was
bigger. That's bigger than Lee Trevino wearing an Expos hat to win the British Open.
Yeah,
That
but remember, we had met him though in Montreal.
He won the Canadian Open.
That's it, and we gave him an Expos cap.
Yeah, and he wore it in
And he wore it.
British Open.
Yeah. The people look at the colors; they love the colors. So Celine, even to now, we talk about her days at the Olympic Stadium, how she started there.
A lot of American executives and people around baseball didn't understand the rich history of baseball in Quebec.
It goes back.
And like I grew up playing, like I came from Jamaica, didn't know anything about baseball. I still might not, but I grew up playing baseball locally and was reaching the junior level when I joined the Expos. But it was already established as a huge talent factory for baseball, and people didn't understand that. But you were involved right from the beginning of Baseball Quebec in 1969, 68.
Yeah, I was there at the very beginning with them, and that's when I joined the Expos as a scout in the area. And then in 1970, Mel Didi asked me to go in there as his administrative assistant, and I worked on player development and scouting. Here I was, a guy from Montreal. I was lucky back then. We had some good players, I think. Steve Rogers, Larry Parrish, Ellis Valentine, Gary Carter. All those guys played a major role. But baseball, just to go back, but don't ask me if I saw them, because I didn't. Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth played in Montreal. Just in case you say, no. They came here on a tour. They had an all-star tour, and they came to play here in Montreal. And then you keep on going. There's a guy named Jackie Robinson who changed the history of baseball, changed the history of the world, as a matter of fact. And I find it too bad he's not recognized like he should, as that's changing not only baseball, but society completely. He was there. But Jackie Robinson, what did he do? He used to go and see young kids play also in the ballpark. And Jackie Robinson always says, it's the first time I was carried by white people after a win who didn't want to lynch me, but they wanted to carry me in victory.
Yeah,
that's Montreal.
My dad was, during the war, he worked in Valleyfield, and he met my mom there. And then he got a job. He went to Queen's University, got a job in Montreal. And he went to see Jackie Robinson play at Delorme.
Lucky.
And like he would tell me all the time about that, because it was such an impressive human being and such an impressive accomplishment. And I think that's partly why I love baseball so much, because of the things my dad told me about.
If you go back to the history of Montreal, We lost baseball for 9 years, but that's not enough to forget it. But you know, you think of the players that played in Montreal. They weren't too bad. Lasorda, Duke Snyder. You keep on going to great players that played with the Dodgers. Ron Peronowski. Lasorda ended up the manager. One of their greatest managers lasted only 23 years, managing Montreal. Walter Alston. So you look at the history of
Chuck,
baseball.
Chuck Connors,
Chuck
rifleman.
Connors at first base, yeah. You know, it's unbelievable the number of professional players. And those people, they taught me what to do when I joined the Expos.
So,
That is, they came to play baseball with us at the local park.
so there's there's a lot of discussion about the way that the Expos organization handled, excuse me, handled Quebec talent locally, signing them, releasing them after 2 years. You had Denny McSween, you had Blair McAsee, you had all sorts of guys. Claude Brodeur, whose brother
Yeah,
did better in hockey.
wasn't too bad. And his dad won an Olympic medal in hockey
Yeah.
also. Go ahead.
But to me, and even at the time, it seemed that the knowledge that those young pros gained in 2 years in the system, they would bring back and pass along to a next generation. How did you see that? I know that they weren't given a lot of times a full amount of time to develop because there was only a 3 or 4 month season in
Yeah.
Quebec.
I think their names are still there in baseball. That's what's unbelievable. Is that you talk of Michel Dion. Remember Michel Dion, who became a hockey player with the Nordiques, was in the National Hockey League for a while. He was Gary Carter's backup, and he would have been. But I still remember in Jamestown for our rookie camp, who I go and pick up at the airport is Michel Dion. A few hours later, I get Gary Carter. And when he saw Gary Carter a few years later, he says, I'm going back to I'm going back to hockey. But I said, Michel, you will be an excellent backup catcher. And he would have been. He would have, not number one, but he would have been. But you look around, and then as the years went by, you have to remember now, Denis Boucher played with the Blue Jays and the Expos. Then you look around, you see guys, Cy Young with Eric Gagne, another guy by the name of Russell Martin. You look at Abraham Toro today, Julien playing. That is all from that group of young kids, their passion for the baseball and the passion from the Expos that just kept on going.
I think,
Because all those guys said one thing to me. Too bad they didn't wear an Expos uniform.
yeah, well, that was the main thing. I mean, that they didn't really put a concerted effort into finding the next great. Because
They
even
were there.
Larry Walker did not make an impact in Quebec and Montreal in terms of he's Canadian, but so what, you know? And,
He was
and
an
he
Expo.
he didn't make a major effort on that either, on that front.
Well, you have to remember Larry Walker was an outstanding player, and whenever we asked him to do things, he was always there to do them. So as a player, and we should be proud of him as a Canadian, and the Quebecers are still talking to him as one. Hey, tu viens de Montréal? No, 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 no. That's
Yeah.
how it is. No, Walker was accepted by our fans.
But just what could have been. I mean, you remember that day in '93 when Denny Boucher was throwing to Joe Siddall and Larry
Yeah,
Walker was in the outfield, and just the impact of Denny Boucher starting for the Expos, and La Presse sent a photographer who stood between Pierre Arsenault and Denny while he was
yeah.
warming up in the bullpen, and Denny had to say, "Excuse me, I need to warm up."
I'd like the pitch, please. But you know,
Yeah.
you look at Toto Gingras with the Journal, Denis Brodeur, Morin Matin. Our sports people and especially our photographers loved baseball. So they took pictures of all our players and they make great events. You know, the day that Jean Beliveau announced his retirement, okay, you were there. He comes to Jarry Park. He does the first pitch. And who's on the mound with him? Willie Mays. Wow, that's
Yeah,
special. Willie Mays and Jean Beliveau,
yeah.
both at the same time.
I
That's how we were.
when Tommy Lasorda was ushered into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, I didn't agree with it because he had only had that year, and besides, I was still reeling from Blue Monday.
I still am.
But he was inducted, and he was a bit of an asshole, really, off the field. Well, on the field too, but like he got Youppi thrown out of a game. How stupid is that, you know?
That's Lasorda.
Anyway, so I wrote a column in the Toronto Star about how it was a bad choice and he's a bad guy and this and that, and how he abused people in Montreal. He took his coaches for clothes, and then when they charged him cost, he threw the clothes and said this junk and blah blah blah. And so I wrote that column, and Lasorda was coming in and he appeared on the fan and he went, you know, I none of that is true. And besides, this guy played outfield for me, and now he's writing this stuff. He thought I was
Oh,
Mark.
well, that's the sort of.
I tell Mark that all the time. I say, hey, you and I
If
are
you ever wonder why Lasorda doesn't talk to you, that's why.
right.
No, Lasorda was a fan favorite, but within the but a big fan of baseball and a big fan of Lasorda.
Yeah, big. That was the biggest fan. Yeah, he was the biggest fan of Lasorda for sure.
Yeah, he was the #1 fan.
So, like, you had all these jobs. You had all the marketing and promotions and PR and but then you ended up first as traveling secretary. I mean, that's a big responsibility, and you really can't tell any secrets out of school when you're dealing with 25 players who all have their own agenda. But the thing I enjoyed about you as traveling secretary is the times that we played golf.
And what great golf courses.
I know, like the West Coast tour, I would always tell my kids, "Oh, I played that course. Oh, I birdied that hole." Well,
Yeah.
there weren't very many of them, but
But when you think about it, you and I we're both golfers and we enjoy it. When I tell people that, they say, wait a minute. One day I sat down the list that you and I played on. We played on 75 US golf courses that either had the PGA Championship, the US Open, you name it. We were there all the time. And the beauty of all that, we never paid. That
yeah,
was the beauty.
that was when signed balls and tickets were
We're very important.
currency. They were
But,
currency,
but today players don't sign it because the ball is worth more than our golf game.
right? But when we played Pebble Beach, I think we were in
Yeah,
a
we did.
foursome with Kenny
Kenny
Singleton
Singleton.
and Freddie Krueger, who
That's
was
right.
Buck Rogers, and there was another foursome, but that was
Yeah.
our foursome. And the thing that was 1992, maybe 91, whatever year it was. But the only thing I remember this most specifically is the third hole. It's a par three, and you sliced, or no, you're a lefty. You hooked the ball out into the Pacific Ocean, and I saw this whale leap out of the ocean and snatch your ball out of the air. And we go up to the green, and you find it in the grass, hanging over the water.
I know.
You chip it over the trap and sink the putt to beat me, and I've never forgotten that.
And I said, Rich, I would never do that. I would never do that. When I saw the whale grab the ball, I said, they won't believe it's a whale, so I'll put it there. No, I never hit the whale. No, 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 no.
And then I saw the Seinfeld episode with the whale with the Titleist in the blowhole. And
That's
going,
mine.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's
There's
Roddy right
there's
there.
Roddy's golf shot. Oh. But we had so much fun playing golf and playing golf with the players also. It was part of the game. How many times would the Braves used to come to town and they used to go and play at the Celine Dion's golf course, at the Mirage, or play at Laval-Stolac, or play at Elmridge? Back then, the players were involved with the other communities also. That's the
Yeah,
big thing.
yeah. I've got before we finish up, I've got a name association, word association. I'll say a name or a phrase, and then you tell me what immediately comes to mind. This is like the lightning round.
I'm ready for it.
All right, Claude Raymond.
#1 best all-time French-Canadian player and best pitcher. Why? 16 years in the major leagues, and he made the All-Star game.
Jacques Doucet.
Jacques, the voice of the Expos. You hear Jacques Doucet's voice in month of March, you knew one thing: summer was knocking at the door.
Should be in the Cooperstown Hall of Fame in the broadcast.
Well, the biggest loss of the Expos for me is Jacques Doucet not being in the Hall of Fame. Because you know as well as I do, if the Expos would still be there, he'd be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm disappointed that other teams have not backed him up.
Régie des Installations Olympiques.
A great government operation.
That's it?
But that's where I met my wife.
Okay.
You know, the Régie, they got a stadium. We have to remember, we had the elections in 1976, okay? In 1976, they were about to build a roof. They'd be finished. And Robert Bourassa said, no, 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 we'll finish it after my elections, okay? He wasn't elected. But throughout the campaign, Parti Québécois said, we will never build the roofs. You lose the power, you lose everything. So it
Yeah.
was just a wrong, powerful decision. It should have been done in 75 for the Olympics. He said, we'll wait. Well, we still are.
The which reminds me how all of North America made fun of Olympic Stadium when the roof tore, when the concrete block, cement block fell. You were traveling secretary then, were you?
Yeah, it wasn't easy back then.
Yeah. So
But the
now
worst,
my
the
point
worst.
my point is
Can I
that
tell you the worst point?
yeah,
The worst. Remember that game? We're playing the Cardinals. And that Saturday night, we opened the roof for the first time. And the fans, I see them there, applauding, proudness. The roof is there. The next day it rains, but we couldn't bring the roof down.
I
We
think
couldn't play.
the roof was pulled back at that time so that it could beat by 12 hours Toronto's pulling back their roof.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But
And,
we
and
didn't.
then
They
we
were able
couldn't
to do
close
more than once.
it. But the my point of my previous question was how come North America made fun of the rip and the cement block, and now everyone's crying for Tampa Bay with the Rays Stadium and it's in
There's
tatters.
nothing there. Nothing there. What happened? Just got torn. Oh, is that right? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Not too
yeah.
bad. Oh,
Pay
gee,
no
I didn't know that.
attention. Pay no
You know,
attention to the Rays behind the curtain.
Oakland has nobody in the ballpark. We used to have 2 million a year, and we were never
Yeah.
credited. But
And
the Expos outdrew more than the Yankees and the Mets.
the 2 million was asses in seats because they didn't just count tickets sold. Like a
Nope,
lot
that's
of
it.
American League teams were counting tickets sold. And it's always the year after you have great success where it reflects in the attendance. So you know that in 82 was better than 81,
Without any
and
doubt.
that 95 would have been better than 94. 94 was better than 93. And it just
Remember,
always a year later, and we were always a year
just
late
miss
in terms of
Griff, remember 1 year we sold 2,700,000 tickets. No one had ever seen that.
yep.
But that's what they did. No. But why did the people make fun of the stadium? Because we made fun of it too. Whenever the American writers used to come in, we made fun of our stadium. So if you make fun of it, you
Well,
have
we
to live with
had
the
we had
consequences.
that truck day that I think
Yeah.
Jim Fanning organized. We knocked down the fence with a
Yeah.
truck that didn't make the turn properly. So
Yeah. Yeah, that stalled the game a little bit. Here's the big truck, and bang, there it
we,
is.
we, we had a sellout crowd for St. Jean Baptiste parade ending at home plate, and then we turned around the upper deck's empty where we sold out them all the seats, and we found
Yeah.
out that separatists don't like baseball.
Yeah. No one ever thought of that.
Yeah.
Now we know, you see the big, huge flags. The first one to do that was the Expos. Remember that? We had those two huge flags in center field, and that wasn't well too liked because back then there was a lot of political difference in Quebec.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
A lot.
absolutely. Um, more names here. Gene Mock.
If it wasn't for Gene Mock, the Expos wouldn't be who they are today. Gene Mock was the Bible of history of baseball, the best manager I ever saw who knew the game. And any manager you mentioned, his name, Sparky Anderson to Dick Williams, they'd all say the same thing. If I had a clinic of baseball, I'd hire Gene Mock.
I would say that in my 15 years of managing my sons in baseball in Ontario baseball, Gene Mock was my role model in terms of over managing.
Well, that he did more than once.
Yeah. Oh
He
yeah.
he did it. He lost the pennant with the
I
Phillies.
I had more parents on other teams and coaches hate me because I
Well,
was Gene Mock,
but you know what? That was his character also. He wasn't too well liked by everybody else. But what a
Uh,
great manager.
Dick Williams.
Best manager the Expos ever had. If I had to win, I'd hire Dick Williams. Felipe is the best I saw with player management, was very good, but Dick Williams knew how to win. He
Buck
wasn't popular with the players,
Yeah.
but he knew how
No,
to win.
no, for sure. Just
And
ask,
he didn't care.
just ask. Well, Mark Langston not here, but Steve Rogers and Chris Spire and those. I mean, yeah, no, Dick was not the most popular guy.
The thing we have to bring the bus story, Rick. We're in Philadelphia and I'm traveling secretary, and we're waiting for the buses. We're on the tarmac, and we're waiting for the buses. And it takes them an hour to show up, 2 hours to show up. So when they show up, everyone's had maybe a scotch too much. So we're in the bus, and I'm sitting the row next to Dick Williams. And Dick Williams tells the bus driver, he says, "You're taking the wrong way." And the guy turns around and says to Dick, "Hey, you manage, I drive." Oh, the players on the bus, they're roaring, they're roaring. And I still remember we're battling for a championship against the Phillies, and
But
Jose Cardinal's up at bat.
let me just finish that bus story because
I'm still on the bus story.
it was the same bus ride, and we're listening on the radio. I was on the same bus as the coaches and whatever, and we're listening to the game on the radio. The Phillies are playing in Chicago, and they
Yeah.
got bases loaded, and the bus driver's cheering for the Phillies, and Dick goes, "If this guy gets a hit, I'm coming over. I'm coming over the seat for you."
That's
And
right.
like the guy gets a double or something and
He
drives
did
the
get a
bus
hit, and
around.
they won the game.
And he went over the seat, and like the bus is on that parkway next to the
That's
river,
right.
it's veering back and forth.
And Dick is hitting him like heck.
Oh God.
I'm trying to get in there by 147 pounds. Ozzie Virgil's trying to hold him back, and their players are cheering. Hit the coach, hit Dick, hit Dick, hit Dick. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
but
like
Dick, he and Felipe are the two best I ever saw to discover talent. Talent. What I saw with Felipe that Dick Williams could not do. Dick Williams could win with winning teams and great players. Felipe Alou won with ordinary players who became great players.
yeah.
You know, everyone talks
I,
about Pedro Martinez, Larry Walker, but when they were at the Expos, they were not the guys that kept on playing elsewhere. And he brought us there. He
yeah.
brought us.
Felipe
He was a heck of
Alou
a manager.
he was the next one, but we've talked about him now. He is my next name. But he's one of the five men I admire most in my life, and that includes my father, uh,
Well,
all sorts of
you're not
people.
making a mistake.
Yeah,
You're not
and like I just learned more sitting in his office before we opened to the media after
yeah,
games, especially after losses. But I learned more about the Old Testament.
he did, but he had a good story every time.
Yeah, he had a good story.
Every time he talked about the Old Testimony, he brought a story from back then to today. He
Yeah.
was able to make it. I always remember asking, I said, "Felipe, why don't you have rules?" He says, "My rule is simple. When you're 0 for 14, you don't play. If you're 14 for 14 and you're drunk, I don't care."
Yeah. But the what I like was the question about pressure. Um, when the bases are loaded and you're at the plate and you're a hitter, like how do you handle the pressure? And Felipe stares the guy down and he goes, "When you're swimming with the sharks, there is no pressure. It's when you're home lying in bed that you start to tremble." And, and I went, wow.
And he always had the right answer,
Yeah.
the right explanation. No, he was even today. I call him up, I talk to him. He still follows the game. He's still working for the Giants. He's unbelievable.
Okay, I got two more. Quebec Nordique.
What a great loss! What a great loss for the province, and what a great loss for Canada because we had a great team there, and it was a great for Montreal and Quebec as far as two goes. And there's one guy who used to coach that team. He probably could have managed the Montreal Expos. Michel Bergeron. Michel
Yeah.
Bergeron was an excellent hockey coach and even more connoisseur of baseball. He could have
He,
managed the Expos.
Michel Bergeron, I think we played golf with him one time, and I mentioned the whale jumping out of the Pacific to get your ball. And he looked at me and he goes, "Trust the whale."
Well, you know what? He's got a good point. He's got a good point.
The last name, Bud Selig.
I have to answer?
Yeah.
I just did.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that shortens the interview.
No, but Bud Selig. I had different talks with him. I listened to him. Everyone blames him that the Expos left. However, he did not want the Expos to leave because he knew he was losing expansion money. When the Expos left, they lost expansion money in Washington, which meant another team would have joined also. But one day he told me, he says, "Rodger, no ownership has come up." He says, "If we had the business world in Montreal come up, we'd be there."
Yeah, there
Take
was
it
a
over.
moment when, and I kept coming down to Montreal. I left in 95 during the strike.
Yeah,
I kept coming down in case it was the last weekend of baseball at Olympic Stadium. And then with the exhibition games that the Blue Jays played, I was there every time. And there was a moment where I think John McHale Jr. came, and I
that's
thought
right.
that that was important that he was there
It
representing Major
was.
League Baseball. And then Mayor Codere went to New York and sat in the commissioner's office. And I thought that was all a good sign moving forward. And then things changed, and you talk about elections results and changes. Um, but do you think that it was ever and what would have happened if 7 years ago the roof blew off the Rays Stadium and
I'll tell you
there
how
were
unlucky we
plans in
are.
place here
If
there
we hadn't started taking down the roof from Olympic Stadium this year, the
yeah
Rays would be playing here right now. If we know what you said before, we were always 1 year late. If we would have started saying, okay, we'll tear down the roof in 2026, the Rays would have played here in 2025.
well I tell you what I tell you in 2019 my first year with back with the Blue Jays in PR the guy from the PR guy from Tampa from
Yeah.
the Rays. They came to play the Jays, and he took me to lunch. And he was asking me about living conditions in Montreal, how he would, where he should live. So it was serious. It wasn't, I mean, I was working for the Jays, so he didn't need to be bullshitting me, you know?
No, no, he owed you nothing.
Yeah. And so I knew then that it was at some point being discussed. And that was the split season concept of 20 to, it was going to happen in 20 or 21, whatever it was. But then, of course, the pandemic hit, and the plan was voted down by the players and all that stuff. So
Mr. Bronfman, Stephen the son, was lied to by Major League Baseball. And that's what I find difficult. They lied to the Expos when there was the player lockout. Remember that. We were supposed to control the salaries. We never did. And that's the baseball people. And Stephen had met the commissioner and he said, let me talk to the people. He said, no, no, I'll take care of it. And the day he found out that we didn't have it, we would not work out with Tampa, he thought it was going to be the opposite. He thought the phone would be positively to have that time sharing. And what is baseball doing now? It's doing time sharing. Look at the teams, how they go everywhere. They're
yeah,
doing time sharing now.
I think the high point of Stephen Brofman's Expos career was when he was 16 years old, and his dad sent him to intern with our PR department at Jerry Park. And Paul Shubin and I took him across the street at 16 and got him drunk at lunch and took him home. And he drove home in his BMW and never showed up for work again after that.
Well, this father said we're going to change jobs for you.
Yeah, at least we're consistent.
Yeah, says this is what baseball is all about.
Anyway, so I appreciate you joining me, Roger. This is a great conversation. I love reliving those days and the respect and the love that we both have for the game. If people want to keep up with you these days, where do they do that? Journal de Montréal, page
Journal
two.
de Montréal. The people and the baseball games on TVA Sports. And the people say, Roger, why aren't you on Facebook? I don't want to be disturbed. I don't want to answer. I was on there for a little while. I said, this is ridiculous, having to answer those people. The same thing with the X account. Why don't you have one, Roger? I don't want to be disturbed. I want to meet people who want to talk baseball, not people who want to trash everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of signing off of Twitter, X, whatever it is. It's become toxic, so whatever.
Well, I am not getting off it. I never was on it.
Yeah, there you go. But it's what I use to promote conversation with Rodger Brulotte and all of my content. And if you're seeing this for the first time, you can go on griffsthepitch.com and get my last 2 years columns, conversations, Kevin Malone. I had all sorts of guys on there that we love, know and love, and weekly Exit Philosophy, which is a podcast that I did with Scott MacArthur, and I'm now doing with Mal Ramanan. And I appreciate you, Roger, and I appreciate anyone who's watching.
Thank you very much, everybody. And after a home run call, I would say, Bonsoir, elle est partie.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right, Raj. Thanks a lot.